Hello and welcome back to the One Report on a pretty cold Monday morning here in the UK. We're going to chat about all of the stuff from this past weekend regarding One Championship. Although I say past weekend because usually it would be past week, but I feel like we're just going to talk about Friday fights. Obviously, there was a big card at Lumpinee Stadium on Friday. And there was a couple of news pieces from earlier in the week, but they kind of relate to Friday fights anyway. So we're going to chat about those as we get to them when we talk about this card. That was a lot of fun and some big talking points for sure. So grab yourself a beverage of choice. As has been, standard procedure for recording these. I've got myself a nice coffee. And we're going to get into it. I'm repping the Andre the Giant shirt today. I've been spending the past week watching the Vince McMahon documentary on Netflix, which, God, yeah, we're not even going to get into that. That is a can of worms, if there ever was one. Shout out to the Boogeyman. And yeah, let's talk about it. I guess we should start with Takeru and Rodtang. So we found out at the press conference ahead of this event that Rodtang and Takeru have already agreed, have signed a bout agreement and they have a location and things like that. Of course, the only potential factor surrounding that is that both men come through their scheduled fights. So Takeru had a fight scheduled this past weekend at One Friday Fights 81. Rodtang, of course, is back in action in Atlanta defending his flyweight Muay Thai belt against Jacob Smith in a rematch. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, both of those, I would say, are pretty winnable fights for both of those guys. It looks like we're going to get Rodtang and Takeru. And then the opening round happens, Takeru versus Tanzin. And you're thinking, oh my God, are we about to see Takeru lose to Tanzin, who is a Letway fighter who was brought in as a replacement opponent for Black Panther? Takeru gets dropped in that first round. It seemed to recover like instantly, but it was a pretty big shot that dropped him. And Tanjin is pouring on the pressure, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And then Takeru comes out in the second round and just I wouldn't say that he kind of showed that there was a huge gulf in quality between them because I think that, it basically turned into not necessarily a brawl because that isn't fair on Takeru and his skills, but it did become a bit of a firefight, and a firefight that Takeru came out on top in. He dropped him with a beautiful body kick, that was fantastic. I mean, you saw, he used that against Superblack, and then Superblack started to use it against Kong Tony. That those body kicks are so good. Drops Tanzin and then drops him again with the hands, just a flurry of hooks to get the finish. What a fight! It really was, you couldn't turn away from it whilst it was happening, especially because of the narrative of like what happens if Takeru loses this. And it was super entertaining. Takeru, both of his fights in one have been absolute barn burners where he's had to battle through some adversity both times. And he nearly pulled it back against Superblack, when he had him hurt and was ripping shots to the body and stuff, and you're like, oh my God, is Takeru actually going to do this? But Superblack was able to come through that and win that fight and defend his flyweight kickboxing belt. And then, against Tanzin wasn't able to overcome that adversity in the same way that Superblack was, and he gets the finish. Incredible fight. And then you get Rodtang joining Takeru in the ring. It did make me laugh when they cut to Rodtang. I believe it was after the first round, and he was just shaking his head. And I was like, oh no, we're gonna lose this fight, aren't we? But Takeru got the job done, and we get the face off between them in the ring, which was a lot of fun. Rodtang pushed him around a little bit, which I thought was, a little bit of added intensity. But you can tell that both these guys just really want this fight. And I think that was the most positive thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, we already learned, like I said, that bout agreements have been signed. So we know this is going to happen at some stage, like I said, providing nothing crazy happens. But you could tell from that face-off, I think, that both guys just really want to have this fight because it would be huge for them, of course. They were obviously scheduled to fight at 1165, and it looked like that event was going to do very, very well for them. And then Rodtang gets injured and Superblack steps in and whatever. I saw a tweet actually just before I was loading this up to show that I think it's like the most One Friday Fights 81 is the most watched live stream on one's YouTube channel, which is crazy. I mean, 1168 and stuff was on that. You know, some huge events in their past, and obviously all of the events used to be on YouTube. So that's huge. Huge numbers. So fair play to them. It clearly worked putting some of these fighters on this card, including Takeru. I'm sure he would have played a fairly significant role in that. We get the face off. Yeah, everything looks great. I'm excited for that fight. Of course, I would expect it to be maybe like March next year. Maybe February. Obviously, it's. I mean, we'll get to this, but double booking is something that one has done a fair bit in recent times. But Jacob Smith is a tough guy, and so I think that even if Rodtang, you know, you saw it in the first fight that Rodtang had with Jacob Smith was able to hang in there, even when Rodtang was kind of dominating the fight. So I think expecting a 2-month turnaround for Rodtang to fight in January might be a bit of a reach. I think February or March would probably make more sense. You would imagine it'll be in Japan as well. That's why I say, is it really dark in here, or is it just me? No, I guess we'll go with that. You would think maybe they could do Japan in January again, because they of course did Japan in January this year, but I'm just not sure. I think that might be too quick for Rodtang. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see that get put together, because, like I said, double booking, and that was kind of the narrative of the main event, which we will get to now. Let me pull this on screen. Actually, that would probably be a little bit better. There you go. I am completely blocking half of this graphic, but as we go through the card, it'll make sense. So the main event, you had Superbon versus Joe Nattawut, and we found out again at the press conference ahead of this event that Talanchai might be injured, which is why this fight has been put together to track back a little bit on what that means. Joe Nattawut was booked to fight Talanchai at 1169 for the featherweight Muay Thai World Championship. That is a trilogy fight between those guys, and a fight that I think was, you know, made a lot of sense to book on that Atlanta card. And then we get this fight announced, and I was like, well, I don't understand this at all, because Joe Nattawut is a fantastic striker, but Superbon is such a tough fight for anybody in the world. He has a very, very good chance of winning this. And then what happens to Joe Nattawut's title shot? And we'll get to Joe Nattawut's title shot after we talk about Superbon. Because Superbon then goes out there and puts on an incredible performance, stops Joe Nattawut in the first round. But now we have the context of maybe Talanchai isn't able to make 1169 in the first place. So you put this fight on to keep this division ticking over, and stuff like that, to keep Joe Nattawut busy, I suppose. I think maybe there's an argument for doing this on the Atlanta card, but then does that do the numbers in Atlanta that it would do headlining a card at Lumpini Stadium? Probably not. It makes more sense maybe to put it here, instead of having Joe Nattawut work towards November 8th and just telling Superbon to be ready for that date just in case they need him. This is obviously a main event worthy fight, whereas in Atlanta, great fight, but probably isn't going to have that same kind of appeal that it would do as a main event in Thailand. Two Thai strikers, of course, going at each other. So yeah, Superbon finishes the fight in the first round. This reminded me a lot of 1168, Superblack versus Haggerty. I thought that Superbon versus Nattawut was probably going to be a 5-rounder. I thought it was going to be a really interesting clash of styles and stuff. And then, no, it just gets decided by a couple of elbows, just like Superblack did to Haggerty. I thought it was a brilliant game plan from Superbon. You know, like, it's no secret that the key to beating Superbon is to put him on the back foot and not let him kind of settle into a groove at all. And, you know, we saw some kind of, I suppose it's the adjustment that he's able to make when he's fighting in Muay Thai versus fighting in kickboxing. When he's fighting in kickboxing, you see in his fights with like Murat Grigorian gets close to him. And okay, he definitely showed, I think, in that last fight with Grigorian that he's getting better at that, and definitely adding some new weapons to his arsenal in terms of landing knees when Grigorian got close and stuff like that. But against Joe Nattawut, it was the elbows. So, you know, if Joe Nattawut is going to pressure and try and get up close, Superbon obviously is going to have the advantage at long range with his kicks. Mid-range, you would say Joe Nattawut because of his boxing, I would say. And so the key for Superbon was, all right, I'm going to keep it kicking range, but when Joe Nattawut wants to get close, we'll negate the mid-range completely. We're either going to fight at long range, all the way out or all the way in, because all the way in, he was able to land some elbows, and the elbows got the job done. It just seemed like that there was a couple that were kind of big shots, and then that final one that he landed closed the show, and Joe Nattawut wasn't able to recover for the 10 count. So yeah, I guess we're getting Superbon versus Tawanchai for a third time. Sorry, for a second time, which I'm well up for. I think that's a great fight. I really enjoyed the first one. You could put that on pretty much any card, I think, and it could be a headliner. Like I think you could probably do that in the US, and whilst it wouldn't be, like having Stamp or Rodtang headline, I think that it's a big enough fight in the way that they did Haggerty and Superblack to where people will go, okay, no, this is a huge fight. I mean, I would still expect it to be in Thailand, maybe Impact Arena, something like that. We did find out a week or two ago that the big Friday Fights tentpole cards like this one that we had this past weekend are going to be at the Impact Arena next year. So potentially first quarter of next year, like March time or something, that could be a headliner at Lumpini for one of these big Friday Fights cards. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think that would make a lot of sense. Of course, the first fight between Superbon and Tawanchai was a Friday Fights headliner as well in December. So I like that a lot. Let's talk about Joe Nattawut for a minute because I feel bad for smoking Joe, to be honest. Now, fair play to him for accepting this fight with Superbon because I'm sure there's a world in which he could have put his foot down and said, nope, I'm waiting for Tawanchai. I deserve that rematch. So he put his money where his mouth is, and it didn't work out for him. And I just feel like you have to feel a little bit for him. He has those two close fights with Tawanchai. He's going to get the opportunity to fight him for a third time in Atlanta. He's going to have some US fans out there. And I think, there's a fair few people that would have picked him to win the belt against Tawanchai. And then, yeah, he has to fight Superbon in order to get a title shot that he was already scheduled to get. And of course comes up short. And yeah, I don't know what's next for Joe Nattawut. Yeah, it feels like maybe this was his moment in terms of the trilogy fight with Tawanchai. Even if he doesn't win that trilogy fight against Tawanchai, to get another shot of the belt and to fight in Atlanta and all of this stuff, and then it all crumbles. But like I said, he took that risk of fighting Superbon and it didn't pay off for him. And if it had paid off for him, then that would have been huge. So this is the fight game. You win some, you lose some. Let's talk about the rest of this card because there was some very, very, very good stuff. Co-main event, Nong-O versus Cameron Nabati. Nabati got the win via unanimous decision. It was a very close fight. I think that there is definitely an argument for Nong-O winning, but I wasn't upset to see Nabati come away with the win. Of course, his boxing is kind of his main skill set, and I think that he was able to implement that pretty well against Nong-O. Yeah, it was a good fight. Like I said, it was a close fight. Not loads to write home about. I wasn't considering some of the performances we've seen against Nong-O from Haggerty and Nico, I wasn't, writing home about Cameron Nabati like, oh my God, this guy's the next champion. Interesting to see where he goes from here. We'll talk about Nabil in a minute. I think that would be a very, very interesting fight if they put that together. But yeah, I'm not totally sold yet on the idea of Cameron Nabati as a future world champion or anything like that. The win against Nong-O is very, very important, but I wasn't left stunned or anything like that. Like I said, it was a close fight. And I thought Nong-O looked good, to be honest. It's a bit like disappointing for him because he had those two losses, comes back and wins against Kulabdam, and you're like, okay, maybe he does have one more run left in him. And then for him to lose here, it's a bit like, okay, well, now where do we go from here with Nong-O? But like I said, I didn't think he looked bad at all. And yeah, it was a close fight. So I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him back in there against another, highly ranked guy. And from Nabati, I think Nabil is. I mean, that fight I think will happen at some point in the future, so it doesn't even need to be next. But I would be interested to see it next. Nabil did get a win over Solin U. It was a pretty I mean, if you watch the Felipe Lobo fight, it was pretty similar to that. Just Solanu couldn't get anywhere near Nabil. You know, when he did, you're like, okay, well, he needs to let his hands go when he does close that gap. But Nabil with those elbows and knees is just so dangerous that you can't really do that. I did think, considering the style that Solanu comes from, like that left way kind of style, I believe he's a left way fighter, right? That he would have at some point just thrown caution to the wind and just tried to walk him down and take shots to land shots. And I don't really feel like he ever just put his foot to the floor in order to try and do that. It was a pretty convincing win for Nabil. I don't think he really got tested that much. I'm not saying that that's, a super big negative. Nabil is still only 20 years old. And so I don't hate the idea of him just getting experience. And, he just fought former title challenger Felipe Lobo. So you can't say that he's not testing himself. He certainly is. But I definitely think there's an element there to where he just wants to keep fighting as often as he can and building up experience. Because, I mean, you look at Nong-O above him in this division, or even Superbon, right? The champion. They have so much experience compared to him. So I'm not against that idea. Like I said, a little bit like the Felipe Lobo fight, where this isn't one that you necessarily need to go back and watch. If you watch like 1 minute of this fight, then you've pretty much watched the whole thing. Because I don't think there was a whole lot of difference later on in the fight or anything like that. And there was never any danger, I don't think, that Nabil wasn't going to do that. It was a good performance, but not a shocking one by any means. I would say that the same cannot be said for Suablack versus Kulabdam. Suablack, I thought was looking really good in this fight for a decent amount of it, and then Kulabdam gets the finish. He looked great. He lands that power against anybody, and he's going to put you in danger. And we saw that, and I think we needed to see that because he's been on the end of some losses as of late to the likes of Nong-O and the BLNN. And if you're going to make arguments for why Kulabdam should be in the mix with guys like that, you say, oh, well, his power, sure, maybe he's not as technical as the likes of Nabil and Nong-O, but you go, oh, yeah, but if he lands that shot, left meteorite, then he can finish anybody. And there's a point in a knockout artist's career where you start to go, if he can't land that power anymore consistently, then what else is there for him to do? Because he's not going to outstrike people per se. And I thought that there was a danger of Suablack doing that to him, but he landed the shot and got the finish. Talk about landing the shot. Sam A, my word, that knockout against Akram Hamidi was remarkable. Probably the best knockout of the night. I'm just trying to think. I mean, the Superbon one was good. The Takeru one was good. But no, it's got to be that, right? That one shot just completely stiffens Akram Hamidi in an instant. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, he had hurt him before that. And so it definitely, you were waiting for that shot to land. But yeah, what a bounce back win for Sam A after he got, face planted by Prajanchai last time out. He wants another shot of the belt at 40 years old. I think that Prajanchai versus DeBella is still the next fight to do for Prajanchai, who of course holds now both the strawweight kickboxing and the strawweight Muay Thai belts. So I would like to see Prajanchai and DeBella run that back. I thought that fight between them was super close, and it was a great fight too. So I would like to see them do that again. I thought DeBella won that fight, so maybe that's a little bit of like bias that I'm like, run it back. If I thought Prajanchai won, I mean it was a close fight, but. So yeah, I think Sam A is definitely back in this mix though, and interesting to see whether he does get another shot at the title next, or whether they want him to have one more. I think he could probably wait and get another title shot, though it's probably easier to sell that fight if it's Sam A versus DeBella than it is Sam A versus Prajanchai, based on what happened the last time that they fought, and the fact that you have the narrative of DeBella. Very, very good striker, but doesn't have nearly as much experience fighting high level opposition as some of these guys. And then you look at Sam A. I mean, the guy's got more experience than some of the fighters on this card combined. A lot of the fighters on this card combined. Um, One of the performances of the night, I think, like sneaky performance of the night from Shadow against Mohamed Siasarani, who there's been like a lot of talk about Shadow and his style, and it does feel like it's clicking um a lot more now in one championship. He did lose on his debut, and then since then has won 3 in a row. This latest win against Siasarani being his best win, I think. Although that win over Jimmy Vanot was also very impressive. But Siasarani was on, a tear. He had beaten Sitachai in his last fight. And so to go in there with Shadow and for Shadow to come away with the win, I thought Shadow looked great as well. Like it wasn't just that he got the win in a tough matchup. I thought he looked fantastic. So that was definitely noteworthy. Sua Kim got a majority decision win against Otis Waghorn. This was a close fight. I just dropped my pen. That was a close fight. It was a lot of fun as well. Interesting to see what they do with Otis from here because this was a little bit of a step up and maybe it came a little bit too early, but he wasn't, outclassed or anything in this fight. It was a lot of fun. It was good back and forth. I didn't watch much of this fight, to be honest. So let me know whether it was worth going back for. As you guys may know, these cards in the UK are on at like 1 p.m. till about half 5 p.m. Something like that, and that is when I am at work, and so it is hard to keep up with these fights whilst working, and at that particular time I was too busy. Takeru Sagawa versus Tanjin, we already spoke about. What a fight. Definitely the fight of the night. I had so much fun watching this one. Hiroki Akimoto versus Elias Ennahachi. This is one that it feels crazy we're only just getting to now. I almost could have spoken about this at the start because the Takeru fight was definitely the fight of the night, but in terms of the one that, two high level strikers going back and forth for 3 rounds, I had a lot of fun watching this. Hiroki Akimoto displayed some toughness because he got dropped in that first round and looked hurt, but was able to come back and he recovered really fast, to be fair to him. But I thought Elias Ennahachi looked fantastic. And again, Akimoto did come back into the fight. But I think you'd expect that from a former champion, right? Very tough guy as well, very durable. But Elias Ennahachi, it's like, welcome back, man. Of course, undefeated in one championship, was the former flyweight kickboxing world champion, now competing in the bantamweight kickboxing division. Just a really well-rounded performance from him. Like the elusiveness was fantastic. His speed, his power as well, which is maybe something we haven't seen too much of before. Yeah, I just thought he looked great. Really, really interesting to see where he goes from here. Obviously, Wei Ray also defeated Akimoto, but that was a very, very close fight and a controversial one. I thought Elias pretty clearly won at least 2 rounds here to get this decision win. Does he go straight in with Haggerty when Haggerty returns? I don't know if that's something that one will push for because Haggerty just got knocked out. I think you can do Ennahachi versus Wei Ray next. I would be totally fine with that. Put that as a, put that on a 1 fight night card, maybe. It's like a co-main event. And the winner goes on to fight Haggerty when he's back. I like that a lot. And I would pick Ennahachi to, I think Ennahachi might win this belt, honestly, after seeing this performance. And of course, what he was able to do at flyweight. And yeah, I didn't watch these first 2 fights either, again, because of trying to work at the same time. So I tuned in as Akimoto and Ennahachi were making their walks. And yeah, this card was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. There were some great finishes, some great performances. Maybe not as many highlight reel viral social media knockouts that you tend to get on these Friday Fights cards, but I think that's partly because of the matchmaking. You had even in dominant performances from the likes of Nabil and I'm trying to think of an example. It's gone from my head, but Soleno was a tough guy and he was going to be hard to finish. And the fights like Nong-O and Nabati and Akimoto and Ennahachi, both guys are just so high level that it's not surprising that it goes the distance. I say that, and Superbon finishes Joe Nattawut in 1 round, but hey, you know what I mean. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this one. There's not a ton to talk about on this episode of the One Report, we do have One Fight Night 25 coming up this weekend. I will be doing a separate preview video on that card. I will also be dropping an interview with Amy Perney, who is fighting on that card. That will be over at Violent Money TV. So you can search for that. It will probably be up, as soon as possible, really. But yeah, you can check that out. We had a good chat about her career, really. Yeah, a couple other things that were quite interesting. I was speaking to her about her fight with Dakota Ditchova from 7 years ago now. So yeah, some interesting stuff in there, hopefully. And I'll post a link to that as and when it is out for your viewing pleasure. But until then, I think that'll just about do it. Thank you for checking out this episode. I hope you enjoyed One Friday Fight 81. Give me your performance of the night, your fight of the night, your upset of the night. Let me know all of that stuff, and we will chat about it next week as well. Yeah, until then, I will see you all very soon. Peace.